All right, I'm going to go ahead and start because we actually have a lot to talk about today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's forum webinar, The Promise and Perils of AI in Historic Preservation. My name is Priya Chaya, and I am the Associate Director of Content here at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Before we move into the session, there are a few logistics. We will take questions from the audience during the webinar using the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You are welcome to submit them at any point during the webinar, but we will be waiting until the Q&A section to answer. You are also encouraged to communicate to all participants, which I can see people already are, through the chat function. The closed captioning function is also enabled for this webinar. You should be able to manage it using your own controls. And then following this program, we'll send out a recording of today's webinar directly to the email you used to register. All forum webinars are available on our National Trust YouTube channel. And lastly, this webinar series is made possible by members of Preservation Leadership Forum, the professional membership program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And we sincerely thank all of you that are with us today. Before I go into what we're going to talk about today, I wanted to get sort of like a gut check. And we're going to start with what we call a chat ball, where I'm going to put up a prompt in a second. And we want all of you to put your answer in the chat. So if you're ready, get set. Let's actually change the screen. In one word, describe your feelings about using AI. Let's see what everyone's saying. All right, I see tentative, uneasy, nervous, uncertainty, wary, mixed and uneasy, creepy. Well, I like possibility as a word. Clueless. Well, clueless, I hope we're going to help you out today. You're not going to feel as clueless about it. Great. So I hope today's webinar provides information to help you make informed choices about the use of AI in your work as a historic preservationist, both as an individual, also at an organizational level. So today you're going to hear from myself, my colleague Joy Austin from Mean Street America, Susan Latanzi, who's the Vice President of Information Technology, Nate Boyles and Ariel Harris, both of whom are going to give us two case studies. Nate will be talking about AI and cultural resource management, and Ariel will be talking about how she used AI to write a nomination application for the local protection of a historically significant residence. We hope that all of this conversation today will help you gain a better understanding of AI and understand how you can use it for yourself. And I'm sorry, I didn't actually mention, I'm going to talk about the perils of artificial intelligence. Joy's going to walk you through actually using it, and then Susie's going to talk about what you should consider as part of an organizational policy. Oops. What you're going to leave the session with today: an overarching understanding of present challenges around AI, an introduction to AI as a tool, and then we're going to give you some tools and resources, a link to a resource list, which is already actually live on savingplaces.org, a worksheet to walk through prompts, and then a recording of the session, which, as I mentioned before, will be provided to you directly to the email that you used to sign up for this webinar. So let's get into it. So the title of this webinar should have been The Perils and Promise of AI, because I'm going to start by outlining the various questions, concerns, and challenges that the use of AI presents as it evolves and changes. I'll be the first to say that if you asked me a year ago, 2 months ago, heck, yesterday about my feelings around AI, it would be a mix of fear, worry, concern, with a smattering of intrigue. But as a public historian and a writer, I come to AI kicking and screaming. It's not going away. I've attended marketing and history conferences where people with a longer background on this topic have talked and explained to me the value that AI can offer. And this webinar is an attempt to provide you with that same information I was given so that you can make your own decisions around using AI as a tool. I'm going to go through these next slides pretty quickly, but as I mentioned before, we will be sharing a resource list that includes a list of articles from the past few years about many of these issues. I also want to emphasize before we go any further that AI is changing every single day. So in putting together this resource list, I pulled from the last 3 years, but also included 3 links that are good places to keep up to date as things evolve and change. And this is a quote from Ethan Mollick, who wrote this book, Co-Intelligence, which I found very, very helpful as I prepped this webinar. So let's get into it. One of the first perils we wanted to talk about and concerns is around the environmental factors. As we know that all around the countries, there are data centers being put up to sort of support the computing power that AI requires. Some of the key environmental concerns that have come up are related to electricity, because these data centers generate a large amount of carbon dioxide emissions and put pressure on our energy grid. And while there are a lot of numbers that I can throw out, and there are articles that will give you all these details if you really want to dig into it, the one I'll mention is from MIT, which says that a single search on ChatGPT consumes 5 times more electricity than a simple web search. In terms of water, which is used for cooling in each of these systems, one estimate reported by the United Nations Environmental Program is that AI-related infrastructure may consume 6 times more water than Denmark. That's not to mention what goes into producing the microchips needed to run all these searches, which include rare earth minerals and the raw materials to build the physical computing power. And that gets into issues around labor and other issues as well. Silences and artificial intelligence. I'm a historian, so what I noticed right away is that AI models can only use what is already in existence in the digital record, i.e. what we as human beings put into the system. And so, because of pre-existing gaps, AI reinforces bias and stereotypes that already exist. I think our case studies will touch on this a little, but due to the lack of digitization or documentation in general for different histories of different communities, we're missing a lot of information that, like as I said before, will reinforce some of these issues. And in some cases, there are communities that have a push for data sovereignty, which also limits what information is going into the system. One of the consequences of this, and this is one of the words you'll find in a glossary, is this thing called hallucinations, which is where AI-generated content, after you put in a prompt, produces information that is kind of like asking it to add 1 + 1 and getting 233. And so that's one of the things that people are worried about and concerned about, and that we should really be aware about it. Finally, while there are many people who have different opinions on it, I believe that it is important to emphasize transparency in AI use. So you'll notice on all 3 of these slides, I pointed where my source materials are and mentioned that I did some test prompting using Microsoft Copilot. And that's the sort of thing we want people to be aware of. And then finally, the final concern is talking about personal and organizational privacy. It's very easy to use AI and dump in personal data, proprietary information, and not think about confidentiality when you're putting in things into the AI tools. But it is very much something that people are worried about and concerned about. And as an early millennial, I know what it means. Okay, hold on, we're gonna backtrack a little. But privacy, I know, is a major concern for everyone. So everything I just said is a laundry list of reasons to not use AI, but the reality is that it's not going away. And what I was trying to say earlier is, as an early millennial, I know what it means to be an early adopter of new technology, but also what it means to ignore tech as it changes the world around you. So acknowledging that, the next set of speakers are going to give you information on how to use AI as a tool, how to put up guardrails, and how it is already being used in the field. So with that, I'm going to welcome Joy, who's going to actually share her own slide. So I'm going to stop sharing. And then, Joy, you should be good to go. Then if you want to pop on screen too.
All right, here we are, technology. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, thank you so much for hosting this really important conversation to kind of talk a little bit more about AI. So I'm going to just be giving you really kind of like a very fast and furious on sort of, AI and sort of how we can start to use it perhaps also in the workplace and personally. As you were kind of thinking about that one word and we sort of saw, all the feelings that we have about AI, here's just a couple other things maybe to reflect on as you're listening to the speakers today. If you could have one thing that AI could do for you every day, what might that be? What's one thing maybe that you wish AI could do that it currently can't? I always feel like folding laundry would be really nice. Or maybe just like on that scale also in terms of that comfortability. So you gave the word, but when you think about how comfortable you might be using AI tools personally or at work, how do you feel about those things? So just kind of setting a little bit of that foundation, thinking about like, have you ever done some of these things? Facial recognition, for instance, that's on our phones, or sometimes, to kind of get us through password checkpoints, chat bots that can be kind of helpful whenever we're on different websites. Thinking about things like saying, hey, Alexa, or hey, Google, or just the way that you might be using, Google Translate, whether that's typing something in or on your camera. Maybe you've ridden in a self-driving vehicle, whether that's actually a Tesla, or I don't know if you all have been in a Waymo. I've seen self-driving cars now picking people up from destination and bringing them to other destinations. So there's different things in terms of even just our everyday and phone and text and email conversations, in terms of predictive things, that you're already really seeing. So these are all just types of AI. And these might be things that you might already be doing in your everyday. So just wanted to kind of level set that in that there's so many things that are happening already in our everyday lives and in our work in which you're already using these functions. In my work, I do a lot with small businesses, with community development, economic development. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking to you today is sort of in that space. So some of the examples that I'll give and sort of how I approach this is really kind of in that economic development and community development and sort of small business development mindset. So I'm going to concentrate quite a bit on generative AI. There's a lot of different kinds of AI that's out there, but since we're just kind of going over some of the basics, this is where I'll spend most of the time. But in generative AI, again, this is what Priya was saying about really kind of thinking about creating that new content. Whether it's text or image, sometimes it's also audio or video. It's learning though from like existing data. So it doesn't, replace, let's say, things or patterns, but it's really, again, just content that is resembling the input and the things that it's trained on. So generative AI, I think, is just widely used in those creative industries. Again, when it comes to content generation, design, and other types of like simulations. I'll just give you a little bit of an example. When I was preparing for this, I went into Copilot and I just sort of asked like, hey, can you provide me with an image of a historic Main Street? And this is, it actually gave me these choices. So these four choices to choose from in terms of what it felt was this historic Main Street, which I thought was pretty cool. But then I thought, okay, what would it look like if I actually also asked the same exact prompt and asked ChatGPT to do the same thing? So you could see, so ChatGPT at this moment in time gave me this one image to choose from. I did find it kind of funny that I had to maybe be more specific, whereas when you see Copilot, all these different choices, there's some people and some vibrancy, but actually ChatGPT, because I was just talking about more of what might be considered the built environment, it actually sort of left out some of those other elements. So you can sort of see how even though AI might be able to kind of help imagine things, it still really needs us to be able to get to where we need it to be in terms of using it for that tool. So just kind of an interesting thing when you're looking at different types of AI to potentially use and play around with, you can see the different types of results sort of based on what it is that you're saying and the information that it's taking in. Predictive AI is another really useful and sort of more general type of AI that's being used. This is also using historical data then to maybe forecast future outcomes and sort of just identify some of those patterns and trends, so that we can start to like anticipate those results. So in the end, you want to kind of think about how this is maybe used in industries, maybe like in finance or marketing. Somebody mentioned, healthcare, or retailers, like our small businesses, tasks that can help predict customer behavior and maybe other types of market trends. But I think it's also important to note that I actually just got a message from my credit card company the other day, and it was there was this suspicious activity that was happening. So fraud detection is actually something where AI can really detect what that is, any types of suspicious patterns, and really kind of think about those financial transactions. So these types of alerts and things of that nature happen within sort of that predictive AI model. Just a couple of little things here. So again, because I work very much in economic and community development, and also with small businesses, these are just a couple of examples of things that I thought were pretty cool when it came to some of the tools that are being used in that industry. So SketchUp, I used to actually use Google SketchUp for fun at one point in time, and it was a free version that was available to kind of reimagine spaces. But these days, the AI model is really helping users create these 3D models of buildings and spaces, and helping people really visualize potential uses for, again, things like vacant properties, maybe how you might convert something like an old industrial building into residential or commercial spaces. So SketchUp now has this model that I thought was really fun to kind of see, again, reimagine those beautiful spaces into something new. And then in terms of like small businesses, there's so many things that are kind of happening and it's changing so quickly. But for small business owners, I always say, because there's so much noise that is there, just to kind of start with what they know and what they're using already, and how can really businesses look at what they might already be comfortable with. I know Main Street America also hosted a recent podcast on AI. You might want to check that out. But again, thinking about things like digital marketing, for instance, Canva, Meta Business Suite, there's like a whole list of things that are kind of coming out that include AI already within. Maybe you're thinking about planning, again, Copilot and ChatGPT being able to kind of bounce ideas off and plan for things. Inventory management is already starting to really be something that is included in things like Shopify for small business owners. And then things like, forecasting demand, with HubSpot. So lots of different things that AI is already being embedded into existing products that you might already be using, or that other industry people are already using. So I just wanted to kind of give you a rundown of maybe, as you're thinking about getting started, what that might look like. Again, understanding those basics and just sort of some of the jargon that might come with it and some of those definitions. Just, again, what artificial intelligence is, and how it really allows computers to learn and reason and start to automate tasks. You want to really think about maybe what your goals are for using that type of AI that you're thinking about using, how to really, identify ways that it can improve, again, your daily lifestyle. And then what are the tools that you might want to use? Like, what are the types of things that you might want to jump into? I use, again, ChatGPT a lot as an example, or for creative things, I use Canva a lot as an example, because they are just tools that I'd been using before. And so how do I start to really incorporate AI within those tools? And then prompts. This is going to be really important when you start to, again, just dip a toe into it and take that first step. Start simple, think about, again, text or image generation and just customizing that voice, your personal voice, but then also your organization voice. And then also be mindful of course, ethics. You talked about this a little bit, how we really need to check and double check things for accuracy. Bias is definitely something that we want to consider as well. And then, of course, those sources. Just very important to kind of think about those things when you're using the AI models. And then just, stay up to date with some trends. I actually started to set a Google alert on certain things just to kind of make sure that if something is changing or coming up next, then I can be a little bit more aware. But really, I think in the end, we just want to be able to explore and have some fun with it. It can seem, again, kind of daunting and a little bit scary, or we can have a lot of trepidation. But I think, a final thought in that regard is AI really is a tool. It's not a threat, but we definitely want to make sure that we can have it there to really enhance the things that we're doing. It's certainly also not a replacement of ourselves, because we're the ones that have to provide it the information in order to utilize it to work. And by starting simple and having very practical applications to it, I think that you can really harness AI to make your life easier and your work maybe more productive and a little bit more fun. So because we were talking kind of a lot about that setup, I wanted to just kind of show you some examples about what might make like a really good prompt. And there's some examples that I just want to take you through. So really, again, being specific about that question and how to like really clearly define your goals and what it is that you need. So just some examples kind of underneath that, like if you're doing something, again, with planning, how to be, again, very kind of clearly defined in terms of those goals. And then of course providing that context. So, trying to do something, I think when you're starting out using AI, just try to do something fun. Here's a nice prompt about a vacation destination, telling it what it is that you like to do, the budget that and the length of time, and for it to be able to help you kind of suggest that type of itinerary, let's say. Or maybe it's hypothetical. You want to just get advice and have somebody to bounce ideas off of. So how can you maybe ask, like, okay, how can I be successful in this new venture that I might want to consider? But again, sort of that clarity and precision, avoiding being vague or overly broad, can really help AI get to helping you with whatever you're trying to kind of ask. So clearly stating what it is that you need from the AI model. And again, this being more in that generative space, that would make like a really good prompt. Few other things here, just maybe it's about creative ideas and inspiration, again, that brainstorming. How can it help you provide some creative ideas? Maybe it is about analyzing something, because there's a lot of data points, right? In my work, I have to analyze a lot of things about a community, so helping me summarize perhaps some demographic information or psychographic information about a community that I'm working with. Or complex things. I talk a lot about funding mechanisms for communities when it comes to doing economic development work. So how can I maybe describe what a tax increment finance district is and its benefits, and maybe try to find different ways to describe that to different people. And actually, with that in mind, you can actually indicate that tone that you would like. So, and that audience. So, maybe I need to explain what a land bank is to a 10-year-old in simple terms, but that's also very beneficial to different kinds of audiences. So, there's a way to really kind of create good prompts in that regard as well. There's also different ways where it can help you with that formatting. So, you need something in a list, you need something in a paragraph, or maybe even a spreadsheet. If you're specific with those requests and you can kind of get down to what it is that you need, there's a way for it to be able to help you get there. But then also, what does it look like in terms of constraints or other types of limitations? So you can also tell it to be able to lead you into the next piece of work that you need to do. So if you've started off, for instance, with a press release, but you need a summary, you can actually kind of, again, provide it with the information that you have, and then kind of lead you into that. So, that being said, I kind of wanted to also show one more example of sort of how to bring about like a larger project, let's say, and then sort of continuously use AI to sort of help you throughout the way. So we like to develop a lot of like work plans in what we do. And one thing might be to help create that. So, for instance, some things that I could help teach the AI model so that it learns more about what it is that I'm trying to ask of it is let it know about what your mission and vision strategies are. Maybe you actually ask it to scan your website and provide a link to your website so that it sort of understands what it is that your organization does. You can also upload different documents. Maybe there's a previous plan or previous things that you've created. And then, of course, like in our regard, again, with community and economic development, more information about my community. And then what's my voice? What's the organization's voice? And you can start to kind of teach it and help it, to provide information to you in that same tone. So, one of the sample work plans that we do often in communities happens to be around a lot of, shop local promotions or how to help support local businesses and ways that they can engage. So this would be sort of a sample of different prompts that I might provide AI along with the different things that I give it in terms of information that it can pull from. And then from there, the information that I receive, I can now use it in the work and in terms of like, really helping me create, let's say, this particular event or activity. From there, maybe with that event, I'm really trying to create something that's more of a marketing and communications plan to go along with it. So, how can I maybe help again understand that event and additional objectives? Provide information about the target audience that I'd like to make sure that I'm reaching, and then of course continuing to train the voice of the organization and other types of key messaging that you might already be using, so that AI sort of knows to pull from that. But again, remember the AI is not perfect, and there's a lot of things that we always have to check and make sure that it's pulling from the right sources, that we're providing accurate information so that we can get, again, the desired effect and goals. So again, a sample to that might be, can you help me please with this marketing and communications plan? Again, with this particular event and sort of giving it that parameter, and then seeing how it can kind of help you determine again, sort of like the different steps that might have to be taken for that matter. So finally, maybe I would like to create some collateral to go along with it. So this might be me moving from ChatGPT, for instance, to maybe Canva. I can upload photos, I can upload short videos, I can use other things that have already been created. There's a lot of different apps that are also within, let's say, ChatGPT. It actually has additional things that you can look at, but I can go ahead and kind of create perhaps a poster of the event or another fun video, for instance. Again, by feeding it information and then asking it to help me sort of get to that next step. And what's nice about Canva, for those that might be using something like that, you can actually put in your brand for your organization, and it can also help you add, different elements like music. So, kind of to conclude with all of that, just some things to kind of be aware of. You've sort of seen how you can create a good prompt. You've seen sort of how you can maybe take one project and have it lead you through different steps of that particular project. But definitely, we want to make sure that AI changes all the time, right? There's so many new tools coming out every day. Lots of different things that we want to be aware of organizationally, but we want to continue to check policies that we have in our organizations about the use of that and other tools. We definitely want to check and double check references because, of course, everything on the internet is correct, right? Well, of course not. So we always want to remember, that it's pulling from that information. So how can we make sure that those things are accurate? Um, I think that it's just similar to, so both ChatGPT and Copilot, they do have references available that you can click on to see where they're pulling resources. This is also something that helps so that you can ask AI not to use certain references if they are incorrect. Again, it can help with rewriting or paraphrasing things. And then also just, of course, making sure that you are allowed to upload the content that you might be using, that the AI is learning from, and you really can't trust, let's say, all of the grammar or math or overall content. So going back to that checking and double checking, you always want to make sure that if it's given incorrect information, that's exactly what's going to be spit out is incorrect information. So just always making sure that it comes from you first. And honestly, I think that when you're writing things, to start with yourself as a source. You probably have former emails or grant applications or different things that you've already used, where you can start with yourself as that source so that you know that it's coming from you. So just a few things to kind of think of in terms of, yeah, green light, red light, or things to do or not to do. But with that, I would like to hand it off now to Susan.
Thank you, Joy. So now I feel like I might be a little bit of the fun snatcher. Joy did all of the really great dynamic things, and now we're going to talk a little bit about policy. I have been with the National Trust for 13 years, and I have to tell you, the way that technology has changed in the last 13 years is it's amazing, right? It's kind of at light speed, from just a normal network into cloud computing, cybersecurity, and now into artificial intelligence. Um, And, one of the overarching goals about an AI policy, it's consistent with why we need policies for most things in our organizations. Next slide, please. A lot of the reasons why we need policies are to be consistent and fair with our staff. We want to have guidance and clarity. We definitely want to mitigate risk, right? So while artificial intelligence can be extremely useful and actually fun, people do need to have guardrails, to keep them safe. You definitely want to safeguard your organization's data. At the end of the day, our data is like one of our most important things, right? If your data gets destroyed, then it puts people out of business, right? And people also need to know what's acceptable and unacceptable. You don't want to leave this up to someone's best judgment. While most people make the right decision, there's always something that someone doesn't think about, or, it's just a scenario they're like, this seems okay, and then it really isn't, right? With compliance, you want to understand the regulations that are out there and, avoid legal issues. Nobody wants a lawsuit. Transparency and accountability, Joy talked about this. You want to make sure that where you get your information, I think Priya touched on this too. You want to make sure that, you know, people know where you've gotten your information and that your information is explainable. And you want the clear policies to provide a framework so that people can use AI safely and in a way that doesn't feel intimidating, because a lot of people are really intimidated by it. Next slide, please. So elements of a good AI policy. You want to look at your ethical principles and values, right? You want to define this. And so you want to include things about fairness, transparency, accountability, safety, and inclusivity. With your governance structure, you want to have one, right? And if you don't have one, you really need to think about it, because AI, I don't think that it's something that you can just kind of let run wild. If you're a large organization or even a medium-sized organization, you need to kind of be overseeing this. Even a small organization needs to. So you need to make it clear to people on who is overseeing the AI usage, right? They need to know who is actually in charge of it. There will be ethical concerns that come up. And who's going to be your decision maker when something like this comes up? People need to know. And they should understand their roles, the staff should understand their roles and responsibilities. With laws and regulations, you want to adhere to the existing laws, but think about the internet. The internet was out there for years, but it was just without really any regulation around it. And even today, while there is regulation, there's still, I mean, I still feel like it's lacking. I mean, all you have to do is think of ransomware and how many people get arrested for ransomware. Probably not many, right? So the laws are constantly changing, and in our ever-changing world, things change every day. So you have to keep abreast of those changing laws. Next slide, please. Risk assessment. You want to identify for people what some of the risks are associated with AI usage, right? Some of the risks could be disclosing personal information, PII, medical information, right? There's a lot of talk about who actually owns the AI created data. And there's also security and privacy concerns around submitting proprietary information into AI. You want to develop usage guidelines and let people know what's acceptable and what's unacceptable, right? Like for us, we're saying that some of the acceptable uses are research, right, and data analysis, project management, a lot of administrative tasks. You're going to see, and like almost every application has some form of AI in it. And so you can go in and you can do things where it can take meeting notes. You can summarize those meeting notes, which saves a lot of time. Um, Writing emails, writing reports, writing policies. And you can actually use it for onboarding new staff. Some unacceptable uses to think about: human decision making. If it's something that you need to have a human make a decision, don't go to AI for that, right? If it requires human judgment or ethics or discretion, a human's always going to be better. So you want to be really careful with that. And then manipulation and deception. I mean, it really needs to be stated that you should never put something in there that is misleading or false information, right? That's a big no-no. Just like Joy said, you put bad information in, it's going to be bad information out. And then be clear about how you're going to monitor and evaluate these systems. So you need to set up a schedule and let people know what it is that you're going to actually regularly monitor and look at how people are using this. So think about how and when your company plans on evaluating these systems. Employee training and awareness is a big deal. I'm going to get to this in my next slide, but letting your employees know about the policies, and I can't stress enough, don't leave it up to people to do on their own. Saying, yeah, we have this posted. It's actually posted on our intranet. Go read it. I have found that very few people, unless they're like, they think they're in trouble, that's when they look for policies. But most people don't look for a policy until it's probably too late. So having regular trainings and making sure that people know what the policy is going to be really important. And then last but not least, when you're creating a policy, write it in language that's easy to understand. Okay, nobody really likes to read a legal document. Sorry, if other than lawyers, right? And so if you want to make people read it, or if you want people to read it, put it in language that is concise, clear, and easy to understand. Okay, if you have to refer back to a lot of different definitions, you're going to lose people. Next slide, please. So now we're to the National Trust and how we're moving forward. And I will tell you that we are moving forward in a conservative manner. I mean, we're historians, right? So we are a little bit conservative whenever it comes to technology. Currently, we're working on the AI policy for staff. We actually have it pretty much done. It's just in for final approval. And so we're hoping to release that very shortly. Once we get final approval, we're going to do mandatory mandatory training for all staff. And the way we're going to handle this, we're going to have training. And then after the training is complete, we're actually going to post that policy on one of our systems where people are required to go out and sign to say that they have read it. You know, you can't make people read it, but you can require that people sign it. And it will have very implicit guidance, and it will say that failure to follow these policies could result as far as termination. I mean, it can have disciplinary action all the way to termination, right? People need to know that it is serious and you're signing it, so you really should read it. We're going to offer guidance on AI applications. Like I said, if you think that people aren't using it within your organization, you're probably not right, because all of these different applications already have it embedded. If you're using Microsoft Office 365, Copilot is included in most of the bundles. And so the free version of Copilot is already out there. So it's good to get your AI policy in place so that you can mitigate any type of situation that could come up before it happens. And then when we actually get into the paid version of some of these products, I mean, we're looking at Copilot just because we are a Microsoft shop, but we'll be exploring other options. We're going to start small and have a cross-departmental group that can actually beta test and that we'll check in with and see how they're doing and see if the products that we're testing are actually the right ones that meet the organization's needs. So like I said, there's a whole world of AI products out there to use, but they all operate a little bit differently. And so looking at some of these products is going to be really useful. And so with that, I am going to conclude my presentation, and I'm going to hand it off to Nate. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. All right. Hi, everyone. Priya gave me a nice introduction to start off, but I wanted to give you a little bit of my background. Before I moved over to Terracon, which is a recent change for us, we were acquired. I was the president and CEO of Metcalf Archaeology. And during my tenure there, we founded a company called Factor Earth, where we were using immersive technology and AI, and in particular, augmented reality and virtual reality to test some new use cases in cultural resource management. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I put that little phrase in there. AI has been here for quite some time. It's not just Chat GPT, but it's been around us for a while. But everything is accelerating so quickly, it feels really new. And if I were to sum up how I feel about AI, curiosity kind of mixed with a little bit of trepidation on what it's going to mean for just where we're evolving. I have 2 young children, so I'm really, really honed in on this topic to see how it might change my life, but also their lives. So next slide, Priya. Okay, so I'm going to start off with some of the, I think, low-hanging fruit, if you will, for the application of AI in cultural resource management. The first one here I've written down as expedited analysis. I'm not talking about putting sensitive site information into a LLM or anything like that. I'm not talking about putting a site form or a resource form, if you're familiar with those data management forms in CRM. We want to maintain that integrity of confidentiality. But what I mean here by expedited analysis is, what about published context? What about publications and articles? I use AI to sum up things that are a long read. I kind of look at it as cliff notes, if you will. It gives me the key takeaways when I'm sent something that I need to review as a document that I know is public information in a sense, or it's within the halls of Terracon's IT system. We're using Copilot, as Susan mentioned. That is the approved LLM within my organization. So I can use internal documents within that safe space, but that is firewalled to the outside world. The other piece of low-hanging fruit that I think is kind of obvious today is production and deliverables. What can you automate? Again, we're not taking site forms and producing them using AI or anything like that. There's very much the need for humans in that space, for the human interpretation and the human input into that content. But what I've seen recently in my new organization is the rote process of deliverables in the sense of formatting. What does a technical report look like in its rows and columns and its images and its captions and things like that? Are your tables aligned perfectly? Those are some things that you can take out of the human process and automate to expedite the production of said deliverables. I feel like that's kind of a safe space to start testing out AI. Again, as an archaeologist myself, I don't believe AI will ever replace the person in the field, in the lab, in the office doing the analysis. There's just too much that we know contextually as applied scientists to replace with a generative AI model. Now, could you train them to assist you in your analysis? I believe that is a potential future for us. I had a friend of mine who's an engineer. He said, if you don't have a trained AI bot of your own that knows you, knows your inquiries, as was presented earlier, knows how you ask questions, and then you're going to be behind your peers if you're applying for jobs or if you're moving into a new position, because there are a lot of things you can do in your day-to-day to just speed things up and take it off your plate. Where we sort of launched our research and development in AI is through machine learning, and it's a big thing, all right? But we're applying algorithms to pixels in particular. And that final bullet point is why we're doing that. So our algorithms will take imagery and be able to analyze the individual pixels of a 2D image. We're using 360 imagery, live camera feeds and stuff like that, very much like Niantic, who created the Pokemon Go application and has a few others in that space. We're using the same technology. And I didn't know this. We kind of came out with our technology in 2018. I think Pokemon Go was 15, 16. So we were kind of, neck and neck with some of this emerging technology. But what we're developing alongside some other companies is the ability to visually position someone in a live feed of the world around them. And that's using a camera. I highly encourage you to check out Niantic and Brian McClendon's podcast. He's on several. Some really fascinating things, and they're just a leader, and they're really taking charge of this space. In a nutshell, a VPS, or a visual positioning system, is replacing, in a sense, the GPS. the geospatial positioning system. And again, using cameras to locate people on the planet. It's fascinating, but in a way, we are doing the same thing. And I'll give you some examples here. Next slide, please. I like to use images and tell stories, so I don't have a lot of words in my slides. This is a screenshot of our application, Factor Earth Pro. Now, the UI is not that pretty. We haven't put a paintbrush to this from a UI UX perspective, but this is our functioning geospatial mapping application that we've used at Metcalf for about 6 years now. We have the 2D ability to look at your maps, your preloaded maps, or active mapping in the field. But we also have embedded our augmented reality technology that I mentioned to give a heads-up display. And what you're seeing here, these floats are simply layers within a geospatial database. But we're using this technology to augment places, to tell, to inform our archaeologists, our historians more quickly about the world around them, to place them contextually in the historic or archaeological landscape. And in this case, what I've highlighted is a property near and dear to me, near Golden, Colorado. This is the Astor House. It's a boarding house built in 1867. It is now part of a art center. It's been rehabilitated. But this is one of our first use cases that we showed the city of Golden. Next slide, please. We're using the computer vision and the AI algorithm to overlay things like a historic photo. In this case, this photo is taken in 1881. And so we're kind of taking the 3D into 4D, if you will. We're taking a place through time. And so this was just a first test case with the Colorado School of Mines. Could we augment a place like this using the research and development that we were pioneering with our computer science program? And this was a fun one because the folks that we showed this to, this is a very iconic place in downtown Golden. And this image is everywhere within the history books within that city. And so it really just had a wow factor. And that's kind of what we were going for with the application of augmented reality, is that we wanted to activate places, but get people more engaged with the actual space instead of looking at a two-dimensional image on your computer or your phone, but you're actively out there instead, interpreting, you're in the space itself. So you're able to use more than just a couple senses to experience history. Next slide, please. We're also using the technology to activate places, like I've said. So we figured out through our research and development how you can append any digital content to any place that you have an XYZ coordinate. Someone likened our technology to turning the entire world into an interpretive center, or the ability to interpret places in a new way. In a sense, it is, but that's kind of not what we were going for. We inadvertently stumbled upon it. But what we were going for was, again, activating spaces, informing users about the place they were at so that they can arrive at an informed decision. Is this resource eligible? Is it not eligible under 106? What else do I need to place in the context of my analysis? In this case, this is Vanover Park, also in Golden. This is a pretty historic place. It's got a dark history. There was a hanging supposedly at this park. And so the city of Golden asked us to see what we could do with this place. And so this tool, in addition to having these individual floats, if you see the next slide, you can actually activate these floats, and then you can come in here. And this is just the Esri database behind the scenes. This is where you append any attachments that you might want. So in the case of the CRM crews at Metcalf, what we're using this application for is preloading our class 1 data, our desktop review with the layers that we have felt we need for analysis of the place where we're going. We're taking out site forms with us so that we can take a look at what sites and what other resources have been previously recorded to help us place a new resource in the context of what we're finding, what we're seeing. What we're also using this for revisitations of sites. So this isn't just a static view within the AR perspective. It's very dynamic, and this is all offline capability. And so we're eager to see where this might go now that we have other applications outside of CRM. Terracon is in the business of engineering and geotechnical work and things like that. I really believe that the future of augmented reality is what's going to help us immerse ourselves more into the work that we're doing day to day. And AI is going to be the engine behind that. Next slide. All right, we've kind of talked about this already, but I think first and foremost, being in CRM, my concern is who has access to that data. I just had a call yesterday with our content management group at Terracon, concerned about the integrity of that data across our nationwide footprint now. We are just integrating systems as a small consulting firm into a large consulting firm, and that was at the forefront of our concern. What happens to this confidential data that Metcalf uses for our work? This is very sensitive data, a lot of stuff that you just don't want leaked out to the general public. We've already touched upon the risk behind the integrity of the data, garbage in, garbage out, but you also, when you start to look at integrity through that lens, you kind of bleed into these next two bullet points. Are you becoming too dependent on AI to do whatever rote task or whatever new task that you're trying to train it to do? I think dependency is a major risk because, again, in my opinion and in my space, I don't believe you can remove the human from the analysis. You can't remove the human voice from the story. And that dependency could lead to one of the three risks that Warren Buffett would lay out for businesses, and that is arrogance, bureaucracy, and complacency. Do you become so dependent on AI that you become complacent in double checking and making sure that this is actually the output that is factual, fact checked? Is it really fulfilling the need and the role of that data? So I think that we need to keep some of these in mind. There are clearly other risks that we can identify, but what I want to say is that we don't know what we don't know. And that's the key, is that we can put all this work on the front end and input, but what is the output? And I'll use a quick example. In my leadership team yesterday, the discussion of AI was everywhere. What could we do to speed up this report done by so-and-so or this analysis done by so-and-so? And I think that's great. I think the idea of trying to test AI in that environment and that application is great. However, we don't know what the output's going to be. And we don't know if the output is actually going to take the place of the intended end goal or deliverable that we want. So something to keep in mind there. And finally, my now, next, later slide, Priya. Where do I think AI is going? Well, in the sense of where I'm at now in my role, leading innovation and technology for the environmental service line at Terracon, I have to test the business case. Going back to that complacency bullet point, you have to have a business case for this if you're going to apply it in an enterprise scale. You can't just throw AI at things. It's like when we were going from paper to glass in CRM. You can't just throw tablets at the process of filling out a site form. Those site forms need to be in a highly formulaic deliverable. The format is very important. And so when you're thinking about now AI in a business, you really have to ask, what is the value proposition? Is it worth investing time and money? And also, is it worth the risk? Where I'm now charged with leading innovation at Terracon, I have to scale the winning applications that make it past the first one. So if it passes that business test case, then I can have the resources to try and scale these applications of AI and other technologies. But you have to prove the first one. Otherwise, from an enterprise scale, you're gonna lose time, you're gonna lose money, and you're gonna fall behind. And then finally, I haven't given up on research and development. That's something that we were very passionate about, and that was forefront at Metcalf. And I think that you can take stuff off the shelf. You can retool things that have been developed by third parties, but at the same time, if you have the resources, if you have the wherewithal, and if you want to do R&D, I think it's very important to try that, to take that risk on that front end, that bleeding edge of technology, simply because you know your use case best. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ariel Harris for our final case study. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, I do know we're about 6 minutes from the end. I hope you'll stay to hear Ariel's case study because it's really important. And if we can squeeze in a question, we'll go over just a little bit. But I hope you stick around. Ariel, take it away.
Thank you, Priya, and thanks again to the National Trust for hosting this call. We've heard some really awesome tidbits of information from Priya, Joy, Susan, and Nate. Again, my name is Ariel Harris. I'm a Philadelphia-based architectural historian. My day job is federal historic preservation compliance, but I'm here to talk about my preservation work outside of the office, specifically using my education and tools as a preservation advocate to try to save places that may be threatened by systems larger than the buildings themselves and share untold stories of groups, people, and places that are underrepresented in our understanding of the built environment. Next slide. I want to begin this brief talk with some relatable imagery. We've all been victims of procrastination, especially with pro bono work where there are no real deadlines except for the ones you set arbitrarily. And we've definitely all had one of those history nerd passion projects where we end up having breakthroughs and look like Charlie over here from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I was in that predicament a couple of years ago, stalling on a project I wanted to get done, a nomination of a single-family home to a local township's historic property inventory, which if listed would prevent its demolition. As I began to put my research together, I was frustrated with parts of the nomination writing and submission process that in the context of a local nomination, as opposed to a National Register nomination, felt difficult to address. Namely, how much to write on the history of already well-documented places and people, how to balance the demands of original scholarship with an audience of non-subject matter expert commissioners that may be less receptive of or uninterested in this information since they plan to side with the owner who opposes the designation, and the urgency of the project, a water utility looming that would love to tear this house down to expand their parking lot. Literally, they've already done that to 2 houses on the street. Of course, ruminating on all of this caused further delays, but I sought out AI as a hope to overcome my writer's block and reinvigorate my energy in this project. Next slide. The question I ultimately came to grapple with and look forward to discussing with you today is, could AI save more places? At the end of the day, I want my legacy in preservation to be through participating in the legal protection process for all different types of historic sites at all different levels of government. I want to find a way to do that as efficiently as possible, meaning producing a high volume of product in a short amount of time without compromising scholarship, and by involving communities underrepresented in historic narratives who may have no idea how to get involved with historic preservation or feel like they even belong in the sphere of historic preservation when they do. With that said, I turn to AI in an attempt to end this existential crisis and see, depending on the success, if I felt like I could use AI again in the future. Again, this doesn't mean we need to get rid of SOI qualifications, grad programs, etc., but I wanted to see if there was a way to solve the problem of there being more buildings that need to be protected than preservationists who have the time to document them, especially for free. Next slide. My project ended up being a great case to test this question, and you can also see it in my background here. 17 Elliott Avenue in Bryn Mawr, which is an affluent Philadelphia suburb in Lower Merion Township, was constructed in 1900. It is significant for its architecture and the contributions of its first residents. It was designed by renowned arts and crafts architect William L. Price. It was commissioned by Helen Sleeper Pearson, who was an all but dissertation math PhD student who taught math at women's secondary schools in the area. Her roommate, Helen Dean King, was a biology prodigy who invented the albino lab rat and early iterations of chemotherapy at the Wistar Institute in Philadelphia. It is likely that the two were in a romantic relationship or Boston marriage or romantic friendship, which also brings significance to the LGBTQ history and LGBTQ community domains. Due to the amount of information already available about some of these people and themes, I wanted to test AI in this nomination and see if it could write a geographic historic context statement that needed little editing, maybe just beefing up with quotes and citations, write an architectural statement of significance, and write biographies of people. In the cases of Will Price and Helen King, both had Wikipedia pages. After using ChatGPT for this experiment, I came to a few conclusions which I'm excited to share with you. Next slide. The first is that ChatGPT helped me get out of my writer's block without losing my voice and academic standards I placed on this project. You see what I asked ChatGPT in the screen grab I included below. I read somewhere that saying please and thank you could possibly lead to chat being more helpful, so that's what I did. Ultimately, the data speaks for itself. I used a little less than a quarter of what ChatGPT provided from me based on my prompt, and this text accounted for less than 20% of the historical context of the area in Bryn Mawr and Lower Merion. In my opinion, that's a pretty statistically insignificant contribution. I read the text now and say, could I have written this myself? The answer is probably, but I needed something to catalyze my motivation to get this done, and it worked. I was able to zhuzh up what was here with more specific information about the area and add primary and secondary sources. You know, the fun part of what we do. Next slide. Which leads me to my next point, that ChatGPT did not and could not provide me with any citations. There are obviously more AI tools coming out all the time, and some of this technology has improved. But as historians, we all know that correct citations matter and sources matter. We need to know where the information comes from before accepting it as part of the record. And until AI models can do this, I do not think it can be used as a full-service nomination drafting machine or replace our jobs. Next slide. The final ChatGPT example I'll share with you is my discovery that in some prompts ChatGPT responded to, they just made stuff up. They conceptualized names for two types of houses that William Price designed that just do not exist. When I asked to elaborate, you see on the left here that they basically admit to making it up. When I asked for a biography of Helen Dean King, where I did forget to say please for the record, what was generated was entirely incorrect except for her year of birth and death. I couldn't help but get snarky in response. And, they provided an apology, but then ChatGPT asked me to provide details and corrections, which I did not have time for, nor did I want to provide them. And I wasn't really planning to have ChatGPT write Helen King's biography, but was just curious about whether it would work. And clearly it didn't in this case. Next slide. Before I conclude, I just wanted to share with you what I did not have AI write. I did not have AI write architectural descriptions, number one, because I had already finished that, and number two, because I had to compile a lot of interesting primary source evidence to prove that the house contained the oldest attached automobile stable, also known as a car garage, in the Philadelphia area. I did not trust AI to do that, and I wanted it to come from me. Secondly, I wanted to write about the romantic friendship or possible Boston marriage between Helen Pearson and Helen King. These two women were recorded as living together for 5 census enumerations, despite Helen King being a notoriously private person at the Wistar Institute and whose colleagues knew nothing about her personal life and assumed she was just married to her job. A classic excuse. I wanted to tell their story of companionship in a way that highlighted the difficulties of being in this type of relationship at the time, especially as women, and emphasizing the need for an affluent and privileged community like Lower Merion Township to honor and be proud of this history by protecting where the two Helens lived together. Next slide. At the end of the day, as ChatGPT includes in their own web pages, they can make mistakes, check important info. But at the same time, AI did help me get out of my writer's block, got me looking for ways to one-up a history write-up made by, as my neighbor calls it, a computer machine. Does not source any citations or primary source research. They like being talked to with respect. They cannot replace history professionals yet. And as we all know, it's one tool of many that could be useful for nomination writing, but is not without its faults. And in the wise words of Tamra Judge from the Real Housewives of Orange County, that's my opinion. Next slide. If you'd like to help me save this house, which is actually the subject of a very important public meeting next week, you can feel free to get in touch with me through any of these channels. And thank you again for taking the time to hear this.
Great. So as you can see, we are a little over time. Let's just take a look at the questions and see if there's one we can answer really quick. Let's see. A lot of these are going to be really complicated. How about, I think we've touched on this a lot. Does everybody else want to pop on the screen real quick? And we're going to talk about the labor concerns real quick. So Zach asked, what about labor concerns around AI? Are historic preservations training AI to do their job by feeding it historic preservation content and demonstrating this kind of analysis? I know that both Nate and Ariel, sorry I said your name wrong earlier, talked a little bit about this, but I was just wondering if we can reiterate some of the things that's going to prevent that. I'm going to say that Ethan Mollick, who I quoted at the beginning, is very clear in his book that one of his 5 principles is that you have to keep humans in the loop. As much as we as individuals, that is what we can control, is that we can make sure that our experience and expertise is additive to this process, and that we will never, my personal opinion is that we're always going to have to take what AI produces and fix it in some ways. Now, because the models change constantly, this might change over time, but right now in this moment, it's not possible. And it's up to us to educate our companies and our corporations so that they know that we cannot be replaced. But Nate or Ariel or Joy, Susie, any thoughts?
I'll speak from a perspective of an archaeologist. Most of the data that we produce and submit to SHPOs and other agencies is firewall. It's not public. And so you very much still need an archaeologist in the field analyzing the resources that we find and have found. So that would be my initial answer. Today, I don't see a use case where the human is not in the field.
Yeah, I think I would say that in terms of like analysis too, there's not a lot of understanding sometimes, or just that human understanding of the decisions that are being made. So I think in the end, it's more about like efficiencies and maybe some of those other more like mundane tasks to kind of get you to like the higher part of the work, the higher learning and the higher analysis of the work.
I'm so sorry, it's 2:05. So unfortunately, I don't think we'll get to these other questions. I see them. There's some really good ones. Like Donna's asking about how do we make the choice to use AI when faced with the high cost of the environmental concerns. Someone's asking about content as far as ownership. I wanted you guys to know that this is just the beginning. We wanted to see what questions came up through this webinar, and I'm going to look into other ways to share this information and answer those questions after this session, and also see what other training we might be able to provide through Preservation Leadership Forum. But just to close things out, we just wanted to share some things that we have coming up. We have 2 upcoming webinars, and next week we have one with our president and CEO, Carol Quillen, with Elizabeth Finkelstein of She Pulled Houses and Christiana Pena of Circa. Then on April 9th, this is hot off the presses, we're going to be doing a webinar about preservation in the wake of natural disasters, which has representatives from Asheville, I spelled that wrong on the slide, and Los Angeles and New Orleans. And the link is upcoming webinars, savingplaces.org/upcoming webinars. And then finally, as I've mentioned, if you've come to a couple of our other webinars this year, it is the 75th anniversary of the National Trust. And so we wanted to ask you for your support. And if you are so moved by what you've heard today and the work and the examples we have given you, and you want to support us producing content like this further, you can donate on our websites, either through the support link on savingplaces.org, or if you have a donor advised fund through that link as well. And all of the links that we shared, just to remind you, and the recording will be shared via an email to the email that you signed up for this webinar. And then finally, thank you so much for coming today. I know it was a lot of information. That resource list hopefully will help you come back and look at things, and we're looking forward to talking about this more in the future in different ways. So with that, thank you, Joy, Nate, Susan, Ariel, and Colleen behind the scenes for helping me put this together. In case you guys don't know, it's been like 8 months in the making. So I'm really glad that we were finally able to share this information with you today. And please reach out if you have further questions at forum@savingplaces.org. Have a lovely Friday and have a great day. Great weekend.
Thank you, everyone.